Howdy everyone and welcome to the Serial Geek TV YouTube channel. My name is James Eatock and today I present to you something special. Back in 2003 to 2006, I was a co-producer on the UK He-Man and the Masters of the Universe DVDs produced by Contender and Cheerful Scout. For one of the special features, I conducted an interview with Filmation storyboard artist and writer Robert Lamb. Well over 1.5 hours worth of footage was shot, but for the DVD I edited the interview down to roughly 40 minutes. A while back I mused that showing Rob's interview in all its glory with new accompanying visuals would be a rather wonderful addition to this channel. Fans of animation and the history of Filmation will love this, given that Rob thoroughly enjoyed his time at Filmation and had much to say. This is the fourth part of the interview recorded back in 2004. Enjoy!
After we finished the first 65 episodes of He-Man, the first season, we transitioned into doing more episodes of Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. And boy, was that a switch. We went from doing He-Man, action, adventure, fantasy, science fiction to urban comedy with the Cosby Kids. And but that kept us working, and we were unprepared for this, for the success of He-Man. It was very well received. It was a phenomenon. I believe the first year combined revenue of the TV show and the toys and all the merchandise and everything was somewhere around $500 million. There was never anything like that before, and never anything since, as far as TV shows were concerned. And maybe The Simpsons, after all these years, have come to equal that. But it was a phenomenon. It was just tremendous. And so there was unheard of, order some more. We got orders for an entire second season, another 65 episodes. That's 130 episodes of a show. So after Fat Albert, we went into production on season 2 of He-Man. After a while, I became discontent with the caliber of stories I was getting. They were okay, but we had done a lot of these, and they were becoming repetitive. I had a copy of the series Bible that was written by Michael Halperin, and there was some really good stuff in the backstories, the mythology and the setup of how Randor came to power, and backstories of the Sorceress and Grayskull, and there were a lot of neat things that had been touched on in the earlier episodes but had been forgotten. And it seemed like we were in this rut of going to another location and having the same exact conflicts and problems with a new set of characters, a new village, a new castle of people, a new villain who acted like the last villain, and they were getting rather repetitive. And I remember sitting at a coffee shop with Vic Del Kelly and Don Manuel and Barry Caldwell, was it? Some of the others, and just complaining about the fact that the scripts were getting stale, and we want to have better shows, and we tossed around some ideas, but nothing really came of it. And I went home that night and I thought, maybe they just don't have the ideas and they just need some help. So I came up with a couple of ideas, and the next day I pitched them to Arthur Nadell, Vice President in charge of creative affairs, or head writer, and he liked one of my ideas, and I thought that I would just basically wanted to board it. I wanted to board a good show, and so I said, well, use it. Well, he had his assignments out, and at first he was going to have me collaborate with Larry DiTillio. Hey, works for me. So I went home and I wrote out an outline for what became Into the Abyss, a story about someone falling into this giant chasm that is around Castle Grayskull. And though that part was not really addressed, it was in some of our reference notes for designing the show and staging action around the castle and everything. And I thought, ooh, wouldn't it be cool if we, since this is the source of He-Man's power, wouldn't it be cool to go down inside of it and see what happens when Prince Adam transforms into He-Man? And that was the premise that I started from. So I went home and I wrote out a 2-page outline. I also wanted to bring back explore some elements of Prince Adam's character, which had largely been forgotten. He was supposed to be this kind of lazy playboy, indulged prince. And I wanted to explore the relationship between him and Tila. So I wrote some of these things down and turned in the outline that I figured Larry DiTillio would take over and make a brilliant script out of. Only Larry was busy. He was not available. And Arthur shocked me and said, well, why don't you give it a try? Me? Okay, sure, I'll do it. And so I went home and I worked, hammered out a script in about a week and gave it to him, and he liked it. And Into the Abyss became a show. He says, you got any more? I said, sure. And I had a friend at my church who was blind, and the one Sunday morning I just thought, wouldn't it be interesting to have a story about a blind child that He-Man first takes pity on and decides to take him on an outing, only something blinds He-Man, and the blind child ends up saving the hero. And that idea interested me, and I pitched the idea to Arthur. He really, really liked that idea. And I wrote that script, which became Not So Blind. And I brought back Ram Man in that one. And after, on the strength of those 2 scripts, Arthur offered me a position on the writing staff. And I, talked it over with Bob Barkwright and Hal Sutherland, and it was agreed to, and I just moved into one of the offices in the writing wing and started writing scripts for the second half of He-Man. It was halfway through the second season where this happened. So I worked there, did a couple of scripts. I actually ended up rewriting freelance scripts more than writing original scripts, which was that was kind of like the dump job. And as soon as I got on, Larry said, "Here, take these," and I ended up doing those instead of writing original scripts. But I did get to write a few. Did one called The Ancient Mirror of Avatar, in which I get to introduce the character of Moss Man. And that one I really wanted to be a 2-parter, but they just wouldn't do it. And the story ends with the main reason for the story not quite resolved, but that's another story. Let's see. At that time, I was working with Larry DiTillio and Joe Straczynski, who is probably more known by the name J. Michael Straczynski, who went on later to create Babylon 5, as well as some other very fine shows and projects. But back then he was Joe, and we would, much like in the storyboard department where we would be battling for better and better quality, Larry and Joe and I would be doing the same thing in the writing department, trying to improve the stories, and we'd study the scripts and look back and see what worked and how can we bring out better things in the scripts. And Joe wrote wonderful scripts. The only thing I had against Joe was that he wanted to prove a point and show that he could write very quickly. And he wrote an episode, I think it was of She-Ra, in 2 days. And I said, Joe, what are you doing? You're killing us here. If you write bunches of shows in 2 days, we're out of work and we're laid off and we have no job. What are you trying to prove? I know that sounds like I was trying to pad the thing, but realistically, a script took a couple of weeks to do. He was just trying to prove a point that he could hammer one out in 2 days. He didn't do that again. We had run-ins with Arthur. Arthur Nadell came from producer-director background in 60s television. He produced several westerns, The Virginian, The Big Valley, and The Rifleman. He also directed some feature films, including an Elvis Presley film, Clambake. Arthur did that. So, and here he was as in Filmation Studios in the writing department. He kind of felt like his glory days had passed. And so where, for me, this was heaven. I was working in I'm working in animation, I'm doing cartoons, I'm doing interesting things, I'm working on He-Man. And so I really cared. I cared about what the characters were like, what we did. It would annoy me no end when we'd establish one thing in one episode and in another story we'd contradict it. Or an outside writer who was not as familiar with the series would write something that did not fit the series. I would get those scripts and I'd say, well, we can't have this character do this because in episode number 35 he did that. And sometimes Arthur would say, oh, well, what else can you do? And I'd come up with a solution. And other times he would say, Robert, you're over-intellectualizing this. Only 5-year-old boys are watching this show. What difference does it make? Well, that really hurt, because I held that, yes, but for 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, 10-year-old boys and girls, these shows matter a lot, and we should at least try not to violate things that we have established already. Interestingly enough, we would get letters from college fraternities. He-Man was very popular on college campuses. The time of day it came in was usually after classes, and they would gather in the dorm rec rooms where the TV was, and they would watch. And we'd get letters asking about some of these inconsistencies, asking about the origins of certain characters, what was under Orko's skirt, and that kind of stuff. But Arthur took a more pragmatic approach in saying, this doesn't matter. 20 years from now, no one's going to care. Well, actually, he was wrong in that, because a lot of people do care and did care, and He-Man is still alive. I mean, there's been a new series just this past year, and so I have the satisfaction of knowing that I was right and he was wrong. So there. One of the interesting things about writing and handling freelance scripts is that we would get live action television writers who were hungry for work, and they'd figure that writing cartoons for kiddies should be a walk in the park. And some of them could do it, and some of them couldn't. And I remember we had one writer who was very good, had written a couple of MASH episodes, won some awards and everything. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. But he really didn't have a handle on animation. He'd call for wild things or outrageous things, and just it didn't fit with the flow. This was during She-Ra, I think. And basically have to scrap most of the story and start over from scratch. And that's why you sometimes see in the credits, you'll see story by one writer's name and then teleplay by Larry DiTillio or Joe Straczynski or Robert Lamb, because the original writer who got paid for his story, it had to be overhauled to make it fit in with the rest of the series.
To be continued.